Hello and welcome to. I never know how to introduce these fucking videos. Hello and welcome to my channel, Wisdom Share 777, where I read books, smoke cigars, and drink coffee. We are currently reading The Value of Others, so this is The Value of Others, Part 9. Miniature cigars to save money because they're rather expensive. To be fair. And black coffee. As recommended in a book we've read previously on the Tibetan rites, they recommend you don't drink milk with your coffee, you just have it black. Well, if it upsets your stomach. But I'm currently practicing the mono diet, mono meals, so just basically a food item, a ingredient at a time, trying to be as simplified as possible. So without further ado, today we start chapter 5, and the sun is in my eyes and it's lovely. Negotiation is the fundamental game of human relationships. Psychology is not my first career. Many years ago, I got my start as a theatre actor. This is Orion Taraban speaking. I received my conservatory training at the Experimental Theatre Wing (ETW) at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, and I worked as a professional actor in New York City for many years afterward. Though it may sound strange, my experiences as an actor taught me more about psychology than all my graduate school coursework combined. Let me explain what I mean. At ETW, I had a unique introduction to acting. We didn't read plays, or analyze characters, or rehearse scenes. In fact, the entire first semester of my training was devoted to a single game. And though this was not how it was presented to me, I've since come to understand that this game is actually the fundamental game of human relationships. As we've discussed, relationships are the media in which value is transacted. So people enter into relationships because they want things from other people, usually things that help them solve important problems or live of living. The issue is that these other people are problems in and of themselves. If they have what we want, other people represent a potential satisfaction of our desire. However, they are unlikely to give us what we want simply because we want it. This is because wanting is free. It costs the wanter nothing to want, but it costs the giver something to give. And the most prevalent and pro-social method of navigating this asymmetry is to enter into a trade agreement for the exchange of unequal goods of comparable value. Since value cannot be objectively measured, and since valuation changes from moment to moment and from person to person, the process by which an exchange is executed is a complex, ever-evolving, infinitely varied operation. It is both an experimental laboratory in which new tactics and strategies are continually developed, and the principal stage on which people seek to secure their well-being and survival in society. The fundamental game of human relationships is how to get what you want from other people. Those who excel at this game thrive, while those who fail or refuse to play do not. This is because all the games humans play with each other are simply context-dependent variants of this archetypal game. At ETW, we called this game the game of please, no. Please/no. And since this game will deeply inform our understanding of the negotiation phase in the sexual marketplace, allow me to explain how it works. The game of please, no is simple. There are always two players. One player, whom we'll call the wanter, can only say the word please. This is the only word this player can use. The other player, whom we'll call the giver, can only say the words yes and no. This player must begin the game from a no posture. The game ends with when the wanter succeeds in changing the giver's no into a yes. using only the word please. That's it. It's a fascinating game. In the game, the giver's default posture is no, because this reflects a fundamental truth about life. In the real world, the universe lives closed. The things we want are generally inaccessible to us and require effort to obtain. This is wise from the point of view of material reality, since most of the things people want in their specifics tend to be acquired through a zero-sum game. For example, if I want a certain job, you can't get. If I want a certain house, you can't buy it. And if I want to marry a certain woman, you can't have her too. So there is scarcity with respect to specifics. This is why the default response to wanting any specific thing is no. If the default response were yes, then the planet would have been stripped of all its resources by now. Preservation of the individual, no less than the Earth itself, requires that it not simply cater to all the desires of other human beings. So the default answer to any question in life is no. Can I have some money? No. Can I take you out? No. Will you help me with my problem? No, 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 no. This rejection isn't personal, it's a feature of reality. However, this feature doesn't stop people from wanting things, so the game of all human relationships is how to transform the default no to a request for any specific good into a yes. This is why it makes sense that the wanter initiates the game. After all, their wanting serves as their motivation to act, and this action serves as the minimum necessary effort to overcome the default withholding of the giver. Sometimes asking is all it takes to receive, though it generally requires more. However, this is precisely why simply asking will never disappear as a strategy in the game. Since wanting is free and giving is costly, and since at least sometimes wanting is accommodated by the mere request for something, wanters occasionally succeed in conjuring a value out of nothing simply by asking. It's kind of like getting a free pull on a slot machine. It costs functionally nothing, and you could hit the jackpot. That said, it should be noted that, if their asking isn't immediately accommodated, the wanters put themselves in a disadvantaged position vis-a-vis the givers as a consequence of their asking. This is because they have functionally confessed that they believe the givers have something they want and the givers can give that something to them. As a result, a good that may not even have been worthy of the giver's attention is suddenly invested with some measure of value as a consequence of the wanter's request, which, of course, serves to drive up the price of any subsequent transaction. Deep appreciation of this economic reality leads to several important understandings. First, it reveals the perhaps counterintuitive truth that in the game of please no, wanters don't maximize their success by maximizing their effort. Doing so generally results in their being priced out of the exchange. However, completely minimizing their effort is generally insufficient to overcome the default withholding required by the asymmetry between giving and wanting. That means we should expect the most accomplished wanters to strike a balance between these two extremes. I call this the take it or leave it posture, and it is indeed associated with a high degree of success in many real-world interactions. Second, the unfavorable position of the wanter gives rise to the most abiding strategy in the game of please no, deception. If wanters are disadvantaged to the extent that givers accurately recognize the degree of their interest or even the object of their interest, then wanters are insensitized to keep givers in the dark about their true desires for as long as possible, and while no player can ever endorse deception as an interpersonal strategy, as deception is only effective to the extent it is unrecognized, and communicating a willingness to engage in deception would compromise the effectiveness of the player's own deceptions. Almost every player uses deception to some degree or another. Indeed, when people express indignation at deception, which is not uncommon, their outrage is typically not directed at deception per se, but at where to draw the line between acceptable and unacceptable forms. Regardless, deception is an extremely common interpersonal strategy. For example, one of the most common forms of deception is reversal. Feigning disinterest or disappointment is something of great value to the wanter, or pretending interest or enjoyment is something of little value to the same. In the sexual marketplace, this can look like men pretending they aren't like the other guys, i.e., feigning disinterest in sex in order to access sexual opportunity, the nice guy, or women feigning they really like you, i.e., pretending interest in the person in order to acquire more resources, the long con. However, as we'll see, deception can also be very subtle and nuanced, as people succeed in deceiving themselves at least as often as they succeed in deceiving others. Third, the economic asymmetry between wanting and giving provides the rationale for one of the game's most effective interpersonal tactics, namely getting the other person to be the wanter. In the game we played at ETW, the roles were explicitly determined in advance. Both players knew who was who, but that's not the case in the real world. Anyone can be a wanter, and anyone can be a giver. What's more, the same person can be the wanter in one game and the giver in another, even across concurrent relationships. The upshot is that if players can succeed, despite their own desires, in provoking the other player into initiating the negotiation, they can typically secure a much more favorable bargaining posture for themselves. Successful application of this tactic requires, on the one hand, some measure of discipline and self-sufficiency in order to abide in their own discomfort of wanting, and on the other hand, some degree of marketing acumen in order to stimulate the discomfort of the other player's wanting. After all, no one can want something from you if you don't yet know you have it. With the right presentation, you may even succeed in cultivating a desire for something other players didn't even know they wanted. This gives rise to the various strategies men and women devise to advertise the goods with which they hope to transact in the sexual marketplace. It also helps to explain why modern women, despite all their enlightened ideas about power, sex, and gender, have never campaigned to normalize, say, proposing marriage to men. Women are loath to dispense with this gendered tradition, and for good reason. On some level, women understand that it is more advantageous for them to continue to wait for a man's offer than it is to suffer the disadvantage inherent in the wanter's position by acting first. This is also at least part of the reason why women tend to react so negatively to any attempts to regulate their dress or appearance. Over and above the indignant reactance most people experience in response to attempts to control them, this reaction belies some degree of awareness with respect to their advantaged position in the sexual marketplace as givers. We can assume that women would not be so opposed if the proposed regulation improved their positioning. Why is my cigar falling apart? Restricting women's ability to freely market their sexual opportunity would compromise their general strategy of awaiting the offer by cultivating desire in men. It is by means of this cultivated desire that men are motivated to approach and initiate a negotiation from the disadvantaged wanter's position. This is also why relationships are much more likely to be arranged by third parties in societies where women's appearance is highly regulated, relative to more permissive cultures. This is Open marketplaces depend on the ability to market directly to consumers in order to operate. Closed marketplaces depend on the inability to do the same. So if both parties understand that whoever acts first is at a disadvantage, then how does any negotiation ever get transacted? Wouldn't the game end in a stalemate before it even began? No, it would not. Just look around you. People successfully transact negotiations all the time. The reason this happens is twofold, namely ignorance and impatience. Most people have no idea they're playing the game of please no, let alone the optimal strategies for getting what they want within that game. That's ignorance. What's more, unsatisfied desires are painful, and people vary significantly in their ability to tolerate this pain. When the pain of unsatisfied desire is strong enough for long enough, the players are compelled by their own temperaments to act. That's impatience. Having discussed the fundamental mechanics of the game, let's now turn our attention to the process by which the negotiation unfolds. Learning to listen. It doesn't take long to novice players. It doesn't take long for novice players of the game of Please No to come up against their own communicative limitations. Most people, and especially most men, overly rely on the semantic information contained in verbal language in order to get what they want from other people. However, if the only word they can say is please, then wanters quickly learn that they will need to come up with other methods of communicating their intentions to givers if they stand any chance of winning the game. It turns out that people communicate with each other in a myriad of ways: body language, posture, gesture, proxemics, proxemics, rhythm, duration, motion, and most importantly, facial expression and tone of voice. You might be surprised at how many ways the word please can be said. This is possible because every word is simultaneously the representation of a concept and the container of an emotion. In their conceptual aspect, words are specific and defined. However, in their emotional aspect, words are general and undefined. They are containers of emotion, and like all containers, they can hold anything they can hold. In any case, the game teaches people not to depend on semantic language, and this is extremely relevant to negotiation in the sexual marketplace. Since the games of attraction and seduction are typically executed on non-verbal levels of communication. Players also quickly realize that no two games of Please No are the same. Wanters can play the game with one giver today, and it will be a completely different game with the same giver tomorrow. Much to their chagrin, Wanters discover that the strategies that finally succeeded in unlocking the yes from a specific giver yesterday are no longer effective today, even with the exact same giver. This is because the game of Please/No unfolds in the present moment, which is always new and never repeated. Players can't rely on scripted strategies or previous victories. They must be continually present with their partners and carefully attend to every step of the interaction. The most successful wanters are highly attuned to the constantly fluctuating internal state of their partners. Since no two games are alike, wanters must attend as closely to the moment-to-moment exchange with their partners on their first playthrough as of their 1000th. And the way they do this is by listening to their partner with a kind of third ear. Since no is also a word, and all words are in different containers of emotion, then the word no can be said in just as many ways as the word please. This is extremely fortunate. If the word no did not contain any emotional content and no other semantic information were provided, then every game would either end after a single exchange or devolve into a series of random stabs in the dark. However, wanters are afforded one means by which to secure victory in a game that would otherwise be functionally impossible. The way givers say no always contains a clue about how they would say yes. Wanters need only learn how to listen. In this way, the game of please/no is similar to the childhood game of hot/cold, in which one player hides something in a room and another tries to find it. If seekers move away from the hidden item, hiders tell them they are getting colder, freezing. And if they start to move in the right direction, hiders tell them they are getting warm, warmer, boiling. Both games require that feedback be given to the seeking party. Otherwise, play could only progress stochastically, if at all. This feedback is both emotional and semantic in the game of hot/cold, which makes the game easier and more appropriate for children, but it is only emotional in the game of please/no, which makes the game far more suitable and subtle and complex. And since people can't not communicate, though they can get very good at muting that communication, wanters always receive feedback clues, whether or not givers intend to provide them. The idea here is to become increasingly sensitive to the emotional timbre of the response. For instance, a sharp, loud, forceful no almost always means that the wanter is freezing cold, whereas a soft, hesitant, quivering no often means that the wanter is boiling hot. The more negative the feedback, the more likely a diametrically opposed tack would be appropriate. The more positive feedback, the more likely only a subtle shift, if not mere perseverance, is needed. By growing increasingly sensitive to smaller and smaller changes in temperature, wanters can zero in on the please, most capable of unlocking the yes, through a kind of emotional triangulation. These are the attributes that make for highly skilled wanters in the game of please/no: mindful attention, emotional sensitivity, behavioral flexibility, and mastery of nonverbal communication. And this goes a long way toward explaining women's relative success in the sexual marketplace. They are generally more adept than men in most, if not all, of these capacities, since this game is the fundamental game of human relationships, which are never negotiated once and for all, but are subject to a constant and evolving negotiation process. More on this later. It should come as little surprise that relationships more often come to accommodate women's needs and desires over time than vice versa. To put it another way, women are better at getting what they want from men than men are at getting what they want from women. However, the attributes in the prior list are not sufficient in and of themselves to secure a yes. They must be actualized using specific behavioral strategies. Let's now turn our attention to what those strategies might fucking well look like. This swear word was added from my own vocabulary bank. Lovely sunny day. Good day to drop a cigar on my fucking leg and burn myself. Whoa. Skinny runs. Hitting the gym today. Looking forward to deadlift. Turns out we have reached the natural close of today's, or this part. We are at a new title. I'm trying to split each chapter roughly in half, but without just cutting off mid-paragraph or on a random page. So when I get a subtitle, which is roughly in the mediocre mid-part of the chapter, that is where I will discontinue and then recontinue in the next video to keep them shorter and more palatable. So thank you for tuning in today. I will add the link for videos to go along with this, and of course I burnt a hole in my bag with my cigar. Fucking yeah, doing well today. Don't forget, a cigar a day keeps the doctor away, and a coffee a day keeps the tiredness at bay. And don't forget, if you're interested, to check out my Etsy shop for animal skulls and bones. This is a sheep that I sourced from Wales. His name is Albert. This guy isn't for sale. He is a little demo which I carry around with me. He's quite cute, I think. It's my pet. Anyhow, I'll see you in the next one, eh? Peace out.